Welcome to the One Gang Worldwide podcast, your ultimate ride into the world of motorcycles. Visit cyclesworldwide.com where we offer a completely free marketplace for everything motorcycles. Join our One Gang community where you can connect, share info, and swap stories with riders from all over the world. Join for free at cyclesworldwide.com and be a part of the One Gang community right now. On today's episode of the One Gang Worldwide podcast, we're veering into a lane that's crucial for every rider out there, our rights and the future of motorcycling. We're thrilled to introduce a titan in the realm of motorcycle advocacy, Kirk Willard from the Motorcycle Riders Foundation. Kirk's been on the front line, battling for our rights and making sure our collective roar is heard loud and clear in DC. Today's episode's packed with insight, stories, and actionable advice that you won't want to miss. Let's dive into a truly imperative conversation with Kirk Willard right here on the One Gang podcast.
Once you walk the halls of Congress, or you realize that you really can redress your grievances with Congress and have an impact. You know, who would have thought a couple thousand motorcyclists could get 535 members of Congress to unanimously say profiling of a motorcyclist is a problem and we need to address it.
We'd like to welcome Kirk Willard. He's the president and chairman of the board of the Motorcycle Riders Foundation. Kirk, welcome to the One Gang Worldwide podcast. We're honored to have you. It's going to be a lot of fun picking that brain of yours, all that source of information you got there. So thank you so much for joining us.
Here, Kirk.
Awesome. All right, let's start off. Basically, let's start off a little bit about you. Tell us where you grew up, how you grew up. How did this motorcycle journey begin?
So my grandfather, rode motorcycles and we raced snowmobiles. And, I grew up in the country in North Dakota, partly in North Dakota and partly in Wisconsin. My dad often had the fastest car in town, and my grandfather had a machine shop connected to his oil field business. So from the time we were little, my cousins, I had access to motorcycles, to snowmobiles, to farm trucks. We could hot rod. And, I think my grandfather rode till he was 79 years of age. I actually have the last motorcycle he rode. In fact, I have my first three, which were his, then mine.
Wow.
So I have all those in my collection back home. But just the love of going fast and being outdoors and in the wind. And, back then in the 70s, you could do that, right? I could ride up town in my little small town at 10, 12 years old and not get in too much trouble. And, there were not a lot of rules. Perfect for a wild kid coming up in the country to have access to all those things.
Yeah.
Did you grow up? Did your dad and granddad were they kind of like good hands guys? Did they teach you how to wrench and do all that stuff too?
Absolutely. My grandfather was a very talented mechanic. My father knew his way around high performance car engines, hot rod type stuff.
Nice.
And my grandfather was a mechanic in the Army and came out, and he ultimately started an oil field business. But we had one of the better equipped machine shops I've seen to date. All the mills, all the lathes, all the cylinder hones. And we had plenty of stuff around being in the farm. So there was really not a lot of concern if we wanted to tear something apart. Maybe we got it back together. Maybe we didn't. We usually did. My grandpa kind of looked over our shoulder and kept us out of trouble. So, that led to the second I, got out on my own, I looked for a shop and some of the tools necessary to do some, more than change handlebars and carburetor type stuff. And, I like to go fast. I like to build stuff that goes fast. I've got a lot of bikes with stroker motors, high performance.
Nice.
I've got a 145-inch motor. That'll rip the tire off the rim if I need to. So that's sort of me.
Do you remember your first bike that you got when you were a kid?
Yep. It's a Honda
And what was it?
CB350. Yeah, I still have it.
You still got it? You kidding me?
I still have it. And it still runs. Yep.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And it was modified.
You said
So
you
I
have the
took
first three bikes?
first three. So we had a Honda 350. So it's kind of funny. My grandfather picked it up and then gave it to my oldest cousin, my next oldest cousin, and then me. So the 350 went through all four of us. I ended up with it. And then we picked up a 550. It went through all of us. And then my grandfather ended riding on a 750, CB 750, which is actually today somewhat valuable. That one
It sure
went
is.
directly from him to me. So when my grandmother said he was done riding. He said, put it on a trailer and get it out of here. So at the time I was just out of college living in southern Wisconsin, and it wasn't my bike. I mean, I had already had some Harleys by then. So I kept it tuned up and running, but I didn't ride it much. But the older I get, the more valuable, of course, that bike becomes to me as being, my first hot rod bike and my grandpa's bike. And there's a lot of connection to the history and heritage of motorcycling. So I like to look at it. Let's say that.
Good, good for you, man. That's so awesome.
It's cool. So how did the Motorcycle Riders Foundation start, and what's the main mission here of the organization?
So we in the about 40 years ago, there was a lot of, there was a national debate started by Easy Riders. Keith Ball, who became the editor and executive vice president of Easy Riders, had the national debate, and it wasn't working very well because there wasn't a great means to communicate. We're in very different places. For example, in Beta, Wisconsin, there was already two really good motorcyclist rights organizations in operation in the early 70s, and other states had nothing. So it was the national debate was struggling. So Easy Riders and Keith Ball started to give charters to states. South Carolina got the first, Wisconsin got the second, and on it goes. And then we hit the it was our founder. One was from Massachusetts and one was from Indiana. Very, very active motorcyclist rights states in the early 70s. And they started calling friends and networking, the next state, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Illinois, and said we should get together. And we called it Meet of the Minds. And the purpose was, one, not to shoot each other, to build some kind of a trust, but really to share information, right? So we weren't trying to create anything. It was, let's get together, let's talk. What's going on with helmet laws? What's going on with federal blackmails? What's going on with speed and horsepower bans in your state? What's going on with licensing, with rider education, which was a real big part of the MRF in the beginning. So it was actually called Meet of the Minds. We had one, phenomenally successful. Attendance was off the charts for what we thought it would be. We decided to have another one. We had a second Meet of the Minds, and folks were, hey, we should toss a little bit of money in for this. So we took that money and created something called the Motorcycle Rights Fund, still MRF. It was just a way to collect the money and, save it for the next Meet of the Minds, the next fall. And wisely, our chairman, our two founders, Billy Gannon from Massachusetts and Balls Faribaugh from Indiana, decided to put together a steering committee. So they picked some of the, intelligent, very passionate leaders, Rogue Herlihy, Paul Vestal, Buck Kittredge, some of those names big in our movement. And they formed a steering committee. They all met in Washington, D.C. We had NCOM, we had AMA, we had AIM, we had a couple of organizations from Europe, met in D.C. and decided to make it. And we incorporated as the Motorcycle Riders Foundation and decided to be the first, established the first full-time office in Washington, D.C. in the late 80s. And we didn't initially have individual membership. We just went to all the debates. They could be called modified motorcycle associations, debates, Freedom of Road Riders. There's multiple names for state motorcycle rights organizations. And we opened up the door and said, we're looking for, charter organizations to join us. And it's, give us what you can to fund the organization. And we're now on our 38th year. We represent about 500,000 people and people from every state. And we have a strong relationship with the National Council of Clubs, of motorcycle clubs, which are clubs. And then there's another organization that is with riding organizations, riding groups, riding clubs, riding associations. And then, of course, we work with NCOM, the National Coalitions of Motorcyclists, and AMA, American Motorcyclist Association, obviously Harley, Polaris, Indian, those folks. And then SMRO's state motorcycle rights organizations in every state. And then we still maintain what we call an International Motorcycle Cooperation Group, and that's with FIM, FIM, and FEMA, FEMA. And FEMA would be more like the Motorcycle Riders Foundation, more of a rights basis, kind of hands-on grassroots activism. And then FIM is more like the EMA. They are in everything. They're on road, they're off road, they're racing, they're promotion, they're marketing, and they do have a rights wing of their movement or their organizations as well. But that's fast forward to today. And again, you add up all of the state motorcycles rights organizations that are sustaining members of the MRF, and all of the clubs that are sustaining members with us, and a lot of the riding groups, riding clubs, riding organizations. And we represent about 500,000 motorcyclists in the country, in Washington D.C.
Yep.
federally.
Look, this is gonna be a little bit of like a two-part question. One is when did you physically come into this organization? At what point? And two is, was there anything that kind of inspired you to get involved big time with this? Did something happen during that time when you got in that you were like, man, we got to fight and we got to go with this thing? So to take us through that.
Great question. It absolutely did. I got involved in 1985. So I graduated from college in 1985. The very first thing I did with my first paycheck after college was go buy a Harley Sportster. I tore it to pieces. Funny story. My girlfriend at the time, fiance, spent about 6 months in Europe studying and touring before we were to be married. And she came home after not seeing me for 6 months, walked in the apartment, and I had a Sportster engine disassembled and soaking in solvent in the bathtub of the apartment. And all she said was, I just want to take a hot bath and a nap. On the bed was a frame, and in the bathtub was an engine. Now that's the beginning. So tore that motorcycle apart and joined Abate in 1985. So of course I'd ridden, since the mid 70s, but I joined Abate, formerly Abate, Wisconsin, in 1985. And I belonged to half a dozen different, Abate organizations. Abate means different things in Wisconsin. It means a brotherhood against totalitarian enactments. That's the original name. It's, American Bikers Towards Education, Brotherhood Aimed Towards Education, different names have morphed over the years. But we in Wisconsin, I'm an officer in Abate, Wisconsin as well. We held true to the original Abate. But what happened to me, so I took that Sportster, rode it around, fast bike, fun bike. They were great bikes. It was a early mid 70s Sportster, a lot of power. But anyway, I decided to build a chopper in 1985. So I did that, built the frame, chromed it, tried to make it look a little bit like the Easy Riders panhead that Peter Fonda rode.
Yeah.
Big high ape hangers, big loud pipes, fishtails up past my ears. If my wife sat on it, or girlfriend or wife, her knees were about by my ears. But I was riding that bike. I lived in Chicago, Illinois at the time, and I was riding that bike through Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin, and a law enforcement officer pulled me over, and I had a hand stamped, and it was legal. It was the Illinois State Patrol had inspected the bike and given me a Secretary of State number to stamp in. So it was actually hand stamped into the neck of the frame. It didn't match the engine, and I didn't have all the paperwork with me, and they confiscated my motorcycle.
Wow.
And there I am in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin, a couple hours away from home. So I called up a local club that I knew. They came and picked me up, got me home. And, I was lit up, right? How can you do that? A legal motorcycle, it's properly titled, it's insured, it has a license plate. What are you talking about? So I had to get an attorney involved, and that attorney's still a good friend of mine to this day. Huge supporter of Abate, Wisconsin, and the MRF and multiple other Abate state organizations. And he got my motorcycle back. I don't know, 2 years later, I'm living in southern Wisconsin, same motorcycle. A sheriff decided to pull me over, said, you don't have the right pipes, your handlebars are too high, your headlight's not in the right place, your horn's not loud enough, you don't have a front brake. And basically said, he didn't take it, but he said, you can't ride this motorcycle till all that stuff is fixed. Now, I probably can get somebody in trouble, but a different sheriff came to my house. I called him and said, I got all the parts, and they were honest to goodness laying on the ground. I had a new set of pipes, I had an AMF front brake sitting on the ground. I had a different set of drag handlebars. I did have a horn, and he came up and said, well, there's all the stuff. you're good to go. Drove away. I never put it on. I still have it. It's funny. I still have all those parts in a blue recycle bin. So it's kind of funny story, but right away, within a couple of years, you know, and back in those days, I looked a lot like I do now, longer hair, but
I was going to ask
I
you
like
that if they profiled you
they did. It absolutely profiled me.
just
So
just to
if you'll
break
read
balls, right?
anything, and if you read anything about me over time, profiling is one of my things, right? I'm huge in working with clubs in ending profiling. We've, made tremendous, monumental strides in, profiling education nationally and in many states. So that's where it started for me, right? I like to go fast and I like to make noise. I like to hoot and holler a bit. And, it just
And you
wasn't
like to
right
have
that
long
you
hair
could
and a
hassle
beard,
me
man.
for what
So
I was
what?
riding. And from there, I decided to run for office in Abeta, Wisconsin. And that was in 1997. So I joined as an officer of Abeta. So I became an area rep. So you have a city, then you have a county, then you have a couple of counties. So I did all that area representative, regional representative, district representative. And then I ran for a position on the state board in 1997 in Wisconsin. Executive director of Abeta, Wisconsin, was one of the high ups in the Motorcycle Riders Foundation. We immediately clicked. We did a couple of big rides together, and next thing I know, I'm on the Motorcycle Riders Foundation board as an assistant, working on budgeting and strategic planning for them. And then in 2002, I ran for a position, the State Motorcycles Rights Organization representative to the board of directors, long title, called SMRO rep to the board. So I did that. That was 2002. In 2003, I became vice president of the organization. And in 2006, I became the president of the organization. So I've been president since 2006. And then somewhere along the way, we merged the chairman of the board position and the president position. And I've been doing both now, probably give or take close to 20 years.
Gotcha. Okay.
Wow. So when you were elected president, was there, I guess, what roles changed, or how did the role change, and what were the main differences as soon as you got those responsibilities?
Well, we were in the very beginnings of having a strategic plan. Mark Buckner he's in the American Motorcycles Association Hall of Fame and the Sturgis Hall of Fame because of his to the industry in strategic planning. Phenomenal guy. So we really embraced strategic planning. We built the budget. We made sure our bylaws were rock solid. We had job descriptions, policies, and procedures. And, in the mid 90s, we were still bikers, right? It was pretty loose.
Right.
Kind of operate on a cash basis, go sell some raffle tickets, get some bucks, hold a conference, get some more bucks. So when I stepped when I stepped in as a board assistant in the mid 90s, really my role was, let's bring a budget. Let's run this like a business. Let's bring some professionalism to them. And I sat down with the board for the first time in 2003, and we listed probably 50, 60 different things we were doing. All good stuff, but as a volunteer organization on a shoestring budget with 4 or 5 things that are, could end or drastically change the way we motorcycle and ride and are primarily moving into lifestyle, our associated lifestyle issues. So we decided to focus. So we became a very focused organization, kind of went from a shotgun to a rifle, very, very targeted. We made sure we had a full staff. I made a professional lobbyist in Washington, D.C., office manager, an assistant lobbyist. And that at the time we started calling states and clubs and said, throughout the year, come to Washington, D.C. and lobby with us. We'll have the agenda. We'll have the talking points. We'll have the white papers or issue papers, and we'll walk you around and we'll lobby together. From there, we decided to make sure the agenda came from the bottom up. So we started at our Meeting of the Minds conference every fall. Not only do we hold seminars and workshops and let every state give an update on what's going on legislatively or safety or education, lifestyle type issues in their states. So we have those seminars, we have those states present, we have clubs present. kind of in blocks or confederations, coalitions, alliances, and they sort of summarize what's going on in their areas, and they present. One of the most important things we do is get everybody in the room, one vote per organization, and we build a legislative agenda. So what's going to help? What can we hear from the states? What's gaining steam in the states that we can take to the feds and say, look, these states are working on these things, they're having success, and it translates to work we need to do in DC or vice versa. So profiling, people are struggling in the states, getting profile passed. Obviously, law enforcement wasn't in favor in every case. They have come around and they've been good partners in some states. But we said, let's make sure the feds acknowledge that profiling is an issue. They can't fix it federally, but let's get resolutions where they acknowledge profiling exists. We should educate. And then from there, we said, okay, states, 535 members of Congress unanimously, both the House and the Senate, federally said it's a problem. Again, unanimous, 535-0. And then we sent it back to the states and said, now the feds got it. Use this in your states. Write language. It's going to work. Draft a bill. It's going to work in your states. And give us feedback as to how it's working. Any adjustments you made, any compromises. Any. And we don't really like to go after penalties, right? It's how do we fix it? We're not looking to get anybody out of a job. Always,
Right.
sometimes,
Right.
right? But that's how it works. So get everybody in the room. Let's build an agenda. What's going to help the states? What can the feds do? What can we do nationally that can help the states, and vice versa? What can the states do that helps us build momentum and a solid base from which to act in Washington, D.C. So we started doing that in the early 2000s, and then kind of moved right into color and chrome. So the EPA went crazy, went after noise, went after tampering. There was
Right.
anti-tampering stuff going on. There were emission stuff going on. And we really, EPA came out and said, color and chrome, do whatever you want to your motorcycle as long as it's color and it's chrome. Well, mid 90s, we lost our minds. How can you do that? So we commissioned we hired a professor from Georgetown, an economic professor, spent about all the money we had. It's called the Vaughan Economic Analysis, Impact Analysis. But we did a study and said, if we eliminate the ability to work on motorcycles and, for example, put shear bolts in heads or shear bolts on or weld on exhaust pipes or have motorcycles disable themselves if the air to fuel mixture is changed. So we fought it very successfully. And obviously today, 28 years later, you can still get those parts. They may have to say race use only, but, and I'll get to that in a minute. I contend I can make a motorcycle run better, more efficiently with less emissions with some of those parts they don't want it to have. But that was
Right.
sort of the basis of, we're not just going to fight helmet laws. We're not just going to fight NHTSA lobbying against us with our taxpayer dollars. We morphed into some fairly sophisticated issues: global harmonization, global homologation,
Right.
into the aftermarket industry, the technical side of what makes noise, what makes emissions, and how do we help the industry and help ourselves at the same time. So that's when we kind of really put ourselves on the map as being other than fight the government, fight the helmet law, fight the roadside
Right.
checks, and some of those things.
Hey, Kirk, I want to ask you a question. Like, MRF's considered really the only voice devoted to the riders, right? In DC. I mean, for the most part, right? I mean, it's really the Goliath of the giants who fights for the riders' rights. For our listeners who may not be too familiar with this, would you be able to maybe kind of go into the profiling part, the renewable fuel standard, and autonomous vehicle, kind of each individual one, and explain to them what all that is right there, so they can have a better understanding?
Sure. So what we've
Let's
got
start
going
with
right now in real
profiling.
time. Yep, profiling. So we had a couple of things. So, we passed a resolution in strangely the Senate first, 100-0, which basically said profiling exists. We're going to acknowledge that law enforcement should adopt training protocol so that they know what it is and so that they don't misuse it, to make
Right.
sure that, if you're doing so I live in Wisconsin. Roadside checks are constitutionally outlawed in my state, but some states you can. So we went at it from the aspect of, if you're going to stop 10 motorcycles, you got to stop 10 minivans or 10 pickup trucks, right? Don't single us out. And we started tracking those numbers. We worked very closely with uh, a group called the Motorcycle Profiling Project. They're a national organization and they do surveys throughout the United States. I think they get 10 to 12,000 respondents a year. So we were able to
Wow.
take those examples and say, we have 10,000 or 12,000 examples around the country, some pretty benign to, spend all day, guys going to jail stuff. So we worked with the MPP Motorcycle Profiling Project. We got that data, compiled it, put it into a fact sheet, and used it very successfully. And then as it rolled through the Senate, we had a couple of states that were very successful. Maryland and Washington actually passed bans against motorcyclist profiling. So they were laws, not resolutions. The federal activity was resolutions. Maryland and Washington, now it's been 5 states have passed anti-profiling measures in their states. I think there's 2 more we'll get in 2024, maybe 3 more. But one of the more important things we did, so that was in 2022. We moved it to the House. The House voted unanimously through a procedure, 435. Well, it wasn't 435. A couple of people were sick or not, seats weren't filled, but over 430, let's say 435 unanimous, that it was the same issue. So we had the House and the Senate. So we took that. Susie Lee from Nevada got into the funding of NHTSA and basically said, my committee, my Department of Transportation committee, is concerned that NHTSA is spending federal dollars to profile motorcyclists. I want a report about if you are, how you are, and what you're spending and doing it. And that was actually inserted into a bill. So we had the Senate, the House and the Senate Committee on Appropriations both were, holding NHTSA accountable for monies that they may or may not have been spending federally to profile us. So that's kind of where we were. That's where we are federally. And now we're encouraging. So we're working closely with states like Iowa, Wisconsin. After Maryland and Washington passed it, Idaho passed anti-profiling, New Hampshire passed anti-profiling, and Louisiana passed anti-profiling. I believe that we'll see Wisconsin, Iowa, potentially some of the Rust Belt states start moving fairly quickly. It tends, once a couple start to fall, especially where we have a coalition called the STEAM states, Heartland STEAM. So that's Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Nebraska. And we get visited pretty heavily by Indiana and Michigan. And when 1 or 2 of those states fall, they pretty much all fall. So we're expecting Iowa might be next. And if they're next, we expect 5 or 6 other states to move behind them pretty quickly. So that's kind of where profiling is.
Hey, is it, just before you get into the next one, are there any states at this point in time that are fighting this completely?
Well, I think just about every state in the nation has some working group, whether it be, the state motorcycle rights organization, one of the club confederations.
No, I mean like
coalitions,
against the they
Oh.
want the profiling, meaning like
Yeah, the federal government's concerned, right? They believe, monitoring citizens, Department of Homeland Defense, the Patriot
Control.
Act, keeping track of us. So those folks that believe that that's the way to treat citizens, of course, are cautious. Initially, our biggest opponent was law enforcement, right? That's a tool they
Right.
use. And some would say successfully, if they do it right, they do it fair, and it's for legitimate, or illegitimate activity. That's a tool they use. And we've never once said, if I'm going 127 miles an hour down the interstate and I get
Of
stopped,
course,
that's
of
not
course.
profiling.
That's right.
Profiling is pulling me over because of what I'm wearing, who I'm with, where I'm going. Okay. But yeah, law enforcement traditionally, when a state first starts to work on it, law enforcement is apprehensive. But, if you sit down meetings with, the head of the state patrol or the Bureau of Transportation Safety, Department of Transportation Safety, a few well-placed politicians who ride motorcycles, and we can convince them that, we're not trying to take a legitimate tool away from law enforcement. We're just trying to make sure that it's not misused specifically against motorcyclists. And they come around. I mean, obviously 5 states and, I think 7, 8, 9, 10 states will have some success shortly. So it's just a
Cool.
matter of, making sure we understand each other, and that, that's what lobbying, grassroots activism is. That's what the United States is. I can redress grievances to members of Congress, to elected and hired officials. So that's what we do. Senate
Thank you.
people, most people, they don't want to be profiled. And, we have some partners, right? There's some folks that would say racial profiling is a problem. Obviously, motorcycles profiling is a problem. Age might be profiling. Now we're getting religious groups being profiled. So we're finding a lot of partners, right? It's not just motorcycles. It's a lot of groups that
Cool.
feel unfairly targeted or unfairly profiled. So we don't deal with any of that. We are 100% motorcycle issue only. But if someone wants to throw their ring in the hat with us, we'll take it, right? If they're with us.
That's right.
So yeah, your question is, law
Strength in
enforcement's
numbers,
apprehensive.
right?
Yeah. And, walking in and saying, guys, you can't say it doesn't happen. Here's 10,000, 12,000 examples nationwide where it does.
Right.
I can go into any city, any motorcycle club meeting, any abate meeting, and very quickly, anybody been profiled? Hands go up. Then I ask them to come see me after the meeting because I want some stories, and those stories are compelling. So,
Gotcha.
and there's several law enforcement, former law enforcement folks, military folks, folks from Department of Homeland Security. If you look at the makeup of members of Congress, there is a lot of law enforcement, and they know, right? They know firsthand where it's used appropriately and where it may not be. So finding those friends, and most of them have the courage to speak out. And again, we've never ever approached this as anti-law enforcement or trying to hamstring law enforcement doing their jobs. It's always
Right.
about unfairly targeting motorcyclists for what we wear, where we go, who we're with,
Understandable.
how we do what we do. So
In the
okay.
renewable fuel standard.
So a couple issues there, right? So 2 things. Right now, if you buy a new Harley Davidson or basically any motorcycle, one of the first pages of the manual, it says, if you run over E10, over 10% ethanol fuel, you void your warranty. There's some reason to believe that ethanol, especially if it sits in a motorcycle, can be, we all know less power, less mileage if you've ever put it in your bike. So as we move into 15, 20, whatever mandatory parts of ethanol, they want to go to E15, they want to go to E20. Some countries in South America run E85, but their vehicles are built for it. So our point is, we know in my old bikes, right? I've got a pretty good collection of old bikes. Absolutely has to have pure gas. And if I can find it, I probably put some additives in some of those old bikes, right? That don't have nitrile valves. They
right.
need it to lubricate the top end. But I certainly can't run E10 in old bikes. And Harley Davidson, who runs millions and millions and millions of miles on these engines for real on racetracks and on dynos, in factories, and they tell me I can't run more than E10, I'm going to believe that. So one, we fight for E10 or better to make sure we always have access to fuel that we can run our bikes on. So that's a concern. And if you want to make ethanol, make all the ethanol you want. Just make sure I can get, pure gas and at least
That's
E10
right.
or less. That's all we're asking for. And, some states are big corn states. They make a lot of money in ethanol. That's fine. Make ethanol. There are other states that don't like ethanol, but we're not in that fight, right? The MRF approach is just give us the fuel we need to run the bikes we have. That's all we ask. And price it fairly. As far as fuel standards, CAFE standards, it's having a terrible effect, right? To say we want to double so it took us from 1960 to 2020 to get to 23 to 30 gallons a mile on a vehicle. And suddenly in the next 8 years, they want us to go from 25 to 58. How does that happen? Right. So how do automakers and motorcycle makers play in that? Right. Obviously, it's a certain amount of electric vehicles that have to offset that. But, from a sympathetic point of view, I'm an engineer, right? So I'm fairly sympathetic to how does Harley Davidson, Ford put all their money into trying to make a vehicle that more than doubles the gas mileage in a fraction of the time that they've used to get to where we are today, and invest in electric vehicles and research nitrogen or whatever the next crazy fuel is. So we push, right? If you want to put out electric vehicles, electric motorcycles included, or zero emission, now electrics, EV and electric has a bad connotation. So they've changed it to ZEM, zero emission motors. So if you want to buy a ZEM, go buy two. I don't care, but don't force that choice, right? Don't force my hand. I want to ride my old stuff. I want to ride my new stuff. We've got a lot of things going on trying to protect the internal combustion engine and the aftermarket industry, but the CAFE standard really is a backdoor attempt at just forcing people to be, give or take, more than 50% electric in the next 8 to 10 years, which isn't possible, right? It's not physically, from an infrastructure or monetary standpoint, it's not possible. So be reasonable. Yeah. Should we go from 23 to 25 to 27 to 29 to 31 to 33? I guess. Should we go from zero emission to tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3? I guess, right? The industry has been able to keep up with it. Harley's now running a 117-inch engine. You can buy a 131 EPA compliant engine from Harley Davidson. You can buy them from S&S. You can buy EPA compliant parts that allow you to go crazy in horsepower. So it's possible.
Right.
Those aren't available for a 1947 knucklehead. So I still want to run those parts like I run them today.
Right.
I ride a 47 knucklehead. So,
we'll get into that later.
There wasn't EPA compliance then. So, that's where we're at, right? So fuel is two things for us. Make sure we have access to fuel that run our old bikes and fuel that doesn't void our warranty on new bikes, and make sure that these CAFE standards aren't artificially forcing a more than aggressive, more than possible aggressive approach to forcing EVs onto people.
Gotcha. All right, and then the third one,
autonomous vehicles.
The vehicles. Yep.
Yeah. So autonomous vehicles, we're concerned, and Tesla's the easy one because folks, you see a Tesla, it's electrified. There were some, pretty crazy crashes early on when they were the first ones, so they're easy to focus on. But we take a bit of a broader approach at the MRF. We're concerned about any vehicle where you don't have control of the vehicle. And there's various stages. There's stage 1 autonomous, stage 2 autonomous, stage 3 autonomous. And there are politicians and bureaucrats in DC, NHTSA, NTSB, Fed.dot, BOT, they believe that someday we could approach, if everybody went autonomous, we could approach, zero deaths on the roadways. They believe that. They actually believe the technology will catch up and will work. They're probably right. But in the meantime, as a motorcyclist, if a car hits another car or one of these electric crazy stops in front of an ambulance, you get around it. If I get hit, it's not going to go very well. So our position is make sure, validate, prove that these things are safer on motorcycles, right? And even, I think if you saw one of our early releases from the MRF, we had an official at NHTSA saying that if I was, riding a motorcycle, I wouldn't do it around a Tesla. Now, that was a bit unfair to Tesla, and that was probably a little bit of weaponizing her position. However, any fatality, I don't care if it's a Ford driving assist, a Tesla, or whatever other electric vehicle they make, if they can't see me and they can't react in the amount of time I can, right? So you're asking me to, let's say it's a BMW with analog brakes, the darn thing seems to stop from me to you, right? Well, if I got an 8,000-pound electric pickup truck behind me, that's not stopping in the same amount of time my BMW, 1600 with
Good
analog brakes
point.
can stop. So do the research, right? So IIHS, so Institute of Insurance Highway Safety, do operate in any mode, whether it's autonomous 1, 2, 3, self-driving, assisted driving, can it, right? And we are frustrated when you see the TV commercial, right? You open the manual of even a Tesla, a Ford driving assist vehicle, it says at all times, eyes on the road, hands on the wheel, remain in control of the vehicle. It's right in the manual. Now that's lawyer speak. So what do you see on TV? You see the car commercial, SUV loaded full of kids, and the dad's playing patty cake looking in the back seat. Well, that's obviously not in control of the vehicle. And I'm not convinced we as a movement, we as a motorcycle movement, there's no more accidents and no more close calls. We're not convinced that this technology is safe yet. It will be. There's no doubt. Again, being an engineer, I can't hardly go against my profession. It will be safe enough.
Right.
But today it's right. They're at motorcycle movement until there's no more accidents and no more close calls. We're not convinced.
Right. That's right.
IIHS, NHTSA, and, just share our concerns. Yep, it's
Awesome.
coming. It's private. There's a lot of money involved. It's way out ahead of the government. The government's playing catch up from miles behind, trying to regulate these things. And I don't know that they ever will catch up and be able to. So we're just asking all of those federal agencies and bureaucrats to hold all the manufacturers of the technology and the users of the technology, such as a Tesla or a Ford or whoever, to make sure that they're properly assessing risk when it comes to motorcycles.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate you explaining that.
Yeah. And to continue to that point, what are some of the major battles that riders are facing today, and including the narrative of electric replacing older gas engines? Can you go into that, and then also any other major battles going on?
We've got, in addition, right? So we always watch helmets and we always watch, any kind of blackmail type mandates. But where we're going right now, what really concerns us are, a couple things all related around the green energy push. We're fighting to preserve internal combustion engines as long as we can, right? So being forced to buy an electric vehicle, or in the state of California, today you can't buy a gasoline leaf blower, a gasoline lawnmower, or a gasoline weed eater. And by
That's
2035, within a year or two, you can't sell a internal combustion engine in the state of California. And there's multiple states that have signed up. And so whatever California Air Resources Board in the state of California does, we're going to also do. So, 10, 12 states, 8, 10. Interesting enough, a couple very, what I would consider progressive or liberal states, and this is the donkeys elephants thing, have decided that they can't make it happen. So they've actually said, we signed up to follow California Air Resources Board or the California standard. We can't do it. Puts too much of a burden on our folks.
Right.
We don't have the money for the infrastructure, so we're backing out. A very conservative and very progressive state, a couple weeks ago, backed out. And the governor said, I can't do it. I can't put this on my citizens of this state. We've come out with a
Thank
couple
God.
things.
Thank God.
Yeah. And it people, and again, I've got, I love the environment. I grew up on a farm, hunt and fish every day I possibly can. I live up in northern Wisconsin, so I love the outdoors. So I'd like to think I'm pretty green, pretty conscious of the
Right.
environment. But I'm not convinced where we're going with wind energy and electric vehicles and the batteries that come from those and all the things that, all the environmental issues that come from all that stuff, is any better than what I run in my internal combustion engine if it's running well and tuned. But so what we've done, right? We went after the end of 2023. We had a couple really big successes at the MRF. We had 2 bills pass the House of Representatives. All the Republicans, and a handful, 6, 8, 10, 12, depending on the bill, joined in. And they both passed the House of Representatives. So we had HR 1435. That's called Preserving Choice in Vehicle Purchases Act. And that basically says in the House of Representatives, it passed 222 to 190, and it revokes EPA's waiver allowing California to make its own emission standards, right? So why do they get to be tier 2, tier 3 and lead the country in their crazy? So we have a federal standard. We're working hard. If you're a parts manufacturer and trying to certify your parts, make sure the EPA compliant, you do it for California, which is one set of rules, one set of money, one set of hoops, and then you got to do it for the federal standard, air emission standard. So that passed, and then right on the heels of that, we had 4468, House Resolution 4468. That was called Choice in Automobile Retail Sales, or CARS Act, and that passed 221 to 187. And that's got a little bit more teeth to it. And that says we're preventing the EPA from mandating emission requirements that would eliminate the production of vehicles with ICE or internal combustion engines. So one says California can't do their own thing and drive the rest of the country, and two, the EPA can't mandate that we eliminate internal combustion engines. Right? Tell us what the standard is, and let the industry and let the consumers, let me, freedom of choice, decide what I want and how I get. We have, so those both passed in the House of Representatives late 2023. We have bills in the Senate. S-290, it has 17 of the 100 senators signed on to that. And then we have S-3094, that has 34 co-sponsors of the 100 signed on to that. So we're pushing that every day. Call to actions come out every time we're close to getting another senator to sign on, or find one that's in strong opposition. We'll put on a call to action, and we'll hope to get several thousand emails into those offices to either tip their hand to our side or get the ones that are adamantly opposed to, rethink, slow their roll, whatever it takes. That'll be a huge push for us in 2024. And then, of course, all of that activity, we make sure the states are well aware. So Ohio passed an internal combustion engine. You can't ban internal combustion engine in the state of Ohio. New Hampshire's had some success. Wisconsin's running a bill in the state of Wisconsin right now to make it illegal to outlaw internal combustion engines, or put a date on a calendar that says by this day you have to. So that's kind of what the MRF does, right? We go back and forth. What's working in the states, send it to the feds. And little politicians talk to big politicians. State guys talk to federal guys talk to state guys. So if we're seeing good movement in New Hampshire, we want all the New Hampshire politicians in the state to talk to the federal New Hampshire people, and vice versa. So, that's the back and forth that is so valuable in this, grassroots activism network, right?
What are you feeling? You feeling that? I mean, of course, you're going to have California, you're going to have probably Washington State, you're going to have a couple of the, let's say, the blue states, right? They're going to be anti. But what's your gut feeling telling you as far as the rest of the country? Do you think there's a good chance that people will, the government will back out of this and not put a date on it, and just kind of just say, let's just roll with what we got? And
yeah, the political makeup in Washington, D.C. is super important. And again, I don't want to get into donkeys and elephants. We are, we work with both sides of the aisle. We work with independents, but this wasn't happening 3.5 years ago, right? We were working towards energy independence. We weren't vilifying oil. There was, no such thing as mandates about eliminating certain things by certain dates, eliminating gas stoves for crime. You didn't hear any crazy like that. So, we could either go that, go on top of that, we'll double down on that missive, or we'll maybe slow our roll and let technology, the consumers, the infrastructure, all catch up to whatever, is best versus a mandate. We're adamantly opposed to any mandates, right? We have fought mandates as a movement since the 50s. If you want to wear a helmet, wear it too. Don't tell me I have to. If you want to wear boots, gloves, and leather, great. If you don't, well, sorry, but it's up to you, right?
Right.
Unless you can prove that there's a real reason why you shouldn't. So, you know, I can get myself off track quickly, right? So let's look for,
Well, you got a source of information, man.
so let's not crash safely. Let's not crash, right? So if you're wearing flip flops and you fall down, you're going to hurt your feet. If you don't
That's right.
fall down, you won't hurt your feet. So back to freedom of choice, right? Give us the freedom of choice. And I'm a responsible individual. Freedom requires responsibility. I treat it preciously, and I trust myself more than I trust somebody from a big city or miles away that doesn't enjoy my lifestyle, doesn't ride a
Agreed.
motorcycle.
Agreed.
You leave me alone. You don't have a basis from which to act. And they can come up with
That's
some
right.
data, which we use too, but um, that's where we're at with internal combustion engine. But I feel like the state, it's starting to uh, you know, this recent cold snap. You read stories about, you know, thousands of vehicles being stranded for days. Well, duh. I
Right,
live in
right. The
northern
electric
Wisconsin.
vehicles. Yeah,
Flashlights don't work in the winter. You know,
yeah.
golf carts don't work in the winter. And
That's
again, the technology will get better. Batteries will get better. They'll get smaller. They'll get more efficient. Look at motorcycle batteries, right? They used to weigh 100 pounds and, be the size of a loaf of bread. Now it can start a 145 cubic inch motor, a
I
lithium
know.
battery that weighs, about as much as a sandwich, and it's smaller than a sandwich. So we'll get there.
Right.
And that's okay, but don't mandate it. And then one of the concerns we have related to internal combustion engines is something they're fighting in Europe, and we talked a little bit about this before, the end of life directive, right? So Europe is talking about ending life. So at a certain, it could be mileage, it could be by inspection, it could be by age. Your car hits one of those three things, and it hasn't been decided yet. But let's say it's mileage. You hit 200,000 miles and you turn it in, you give it away, and you get credit for it, and you give all your parts away. Or you take it to an inspection house. Well, what could go wrong with that, right? Who determines what's safe,
Yeah.
what's not safe, what's not running well, where it's running well? So far, motorcycles, and this is in Europe, so this is European Union, certainly the UN's involved. The most recent with motorcycles is let's carve out days and times, ride the church, ride in a parade on Sunday, ride off the interstate. In Union, certainly the UN's involved. The most recent with motorcycles is let's carve out
Right.
days and times, ride the church, ride in Brussels,
That's right. That's right.
Belgium, and working with FEMA, Federation of European Motorcyclists Association. They're also in Brussels. They both have operatives in Geneva, Switzerland, which is where the UN is. They're fighting it, right? Hey, leave us alone. We're half the weight of a car. We get 50, 60 miles a gallon already. We don't wear the roads out. So we're already better than any electric vehicle you can come up with, right? Environmentally speaking. Yeah, we put out a little bit of emission, but our study that we did, the Vaughn study we did, said we're a third of an inch on a football field in the United States. We got 9 million motorcyclists out of 9 million motorcyclists out of 350 people, 350 million people. And out of all that, we're 1/3 of an inch on a football field. That's negligible.
Right.
So if we can run 50, 60 miles a gallon, there's no congestion on the roads. If everybody owned a motorcycle, there'd be end of traffic jams, plenty of parking. We wouldn't wear the roads out, except,
That's right.
all the things. So we're obviously fighting with FEMA and FIM and the end of life directive. But you can imagine the horror if they came and said, your bike is too expensive to repair. We're going to keep it. We're going to give you X amount of dollars in credit for something else. Oh, by the way, bring me all your parts. Not me. I've got a whole shop full of antique parts that are priceless. So,
That's right.
I'd like to think in the United States we can fight that based on use of the Constitution. Those are my parts. I collected them rightfully. They're mine. You can't have them. Recall, when President Obama was in office, we had something called cash for clunkers. We've already been socialized in a citizenry in the United States to say, hey, turn in your old car, we'll give you money for a new car. So we've already done it. Now, we didn't think
Right.
it was a good idea then. And of course, now it's a horrendous idea. but we have been socialized, or turn in your gas car and we'll give you a bunch of money to go buy an electric car. So we're already doing it, right? We're already doing a end of life directive, not calling it that, but in an effect, we've had one in the United States, and it's happening today, right? Again, turn in your gas car, get credit for electric car. So obviously, we're going to fight that end of life directive. Our ears are as perked as they can be. We look like Doberman pinschers
Sure.
when we hear the word end of life directive.
Right.
We can't stay in tune with what Europe's doing enough. And great news. We have partners. Through our International Motorcycle Cooperation Group, we have great partners. We share information openly. We meet regularly, and anytime they make progress or lose ground, we're the first to know, and we act accordingly. Right now, the best thing we can do is educate folks. So what you're doing here on this show is so hypercritical, right? The folks that are in the
Awesome.
movement, they're debate members or MRF members, they get it. They're in the fight. But I said earlier that it might be 500,000 out of 9 million, not enough. And if you look at out of
Yep.
those 500,000 that it paid dues to something, join the MRF, join debate, join American Motorcyclists or the Antique Motorcycle Club of America, whoever, or BMW Owners of America, whatever, they paid some amount of money to somebody to get some information. But the folks that really, so when I go to, let's say, Wisconsin, they have 10,000 members. We have a state lobby day, maybe 1,000 people show up. So even then, in a state where we're very, very active, very, very successful, we have 10,000 of the 300. So 300,000 riders in Wisconsin, 10,000 belong to a beta in Wisconsin. Half of those belong to the MRF. And when we go to DC, we take 20 people. We go to our state capital for our state lobby day. We have 1,000 people. So where's the other 9,000? And so
Right.
we're already, this much. So out of those 9 million, if we could get a couple percentage points more, it would be hugely impactful.
Before we go, before Ben asks you the next question, I just wanted to say, from a person like you, I've got a couple of vintage bikes in my collection too, man. So I appreciate you guys fighting like that. That's I couldn't even, I don't know, man. They'd have to shoot me. I wouldn't give them up.
I think that, there's, I think to a person every time. So I go to, 20-ish states a year and present this kind of thing to the membership of ABATE or the National Council of Motorcycle Clubs or the National Coalition of Motorcyclists. So I speak, every other weekend somewhere in the United States. And I've yet to have somebody walk up and say, yeah, it's no big deal. They are lit up,
Yeah, right.
passionate. They're not doing that. They can't do that. How can they do that? What do I got to do? Well, that's the answer we want. What do I got to do? Well, you're my new best friend. I'll tell you what we got to do.
That's right.
Yeah. That leads perfectly into the next question. It's easy to say that freedom of choice and the fighting the end of life directive is important to every rider. What would you say to riders out there who are interested in joining, but maybe they're intimidated by the time commitment? Maybe they don't think that they have enough time, or, just out of ignorance, they don't know what the time commitment look like. What do you have any kind of other option outside of membership? And can you tell us more about the membership for what it would look like for a time commitment for?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. We do. So obviously we're very active on social media, every platform you can find. Our website, mrf.org, links to videos made by, key and aftermarket guys. So guys that are running aftermarket companies, guys that are running large motorcycle shops, of course, us. But we'll link to their videos. We'll link to our videos. We'll share stuff that we see from other states, from national. Yeah, we'd certainly love to have everybody be a member of a state motorcyclist rights organization and ABATE, or, become a member of the Motorcycle Riders Foundation. That would be appreciated, because obviously having a staff in DC is not inexpensive, and moving us around the country in groups to have these seminars and conventions, not cheap. But what I love to see first, right? Just sign up for our alerts, right? We absolutely protect our mailing list. It doesn't go outside of the Motorcycle Riders Foundation. If you're not on the board, you can't get it for the most part. And we hold that near and dear. It's not a telemarketing thing. We don't sell it, so we keep it. And what we do with that, if you go to mrf.org over on the side, there's something called alerts, and you can subscribe to our alerts. So, a couple times a week, and you don't get, it's the fifth annual freeze your nuts run on Christmas Day. We don't do that kind of stuff, right? What we do is it's legislative, it's pointed, and it has a purpose, right? So it'll be an update. Hey, NHTSA just did something crazy, or four more guys signed on to the Internal Combustion Engine Preservation Act, or um, if there's an industry thing that just happened with right to repair or right to modify. So you'll get an email or a link to a video where it's maybe Bob K. So Bob K has owned a couple of very large aftermarket distributorships. I mean, the big couple, been an executive in a couple others, and he'll do a video and say, hey, I'm hearing from my shops that I used to support, that I used to deliver parts to, that I am hearing from guys that make parts that I used to sell as a distributor. And here's what's going on. So we'll link to those kind of monumental or informational type videos. But that's, again, go to mrf.org, sign up for our alerts. You'll get a couple of times a week. You'll get, a page, simple, couple paragraphs. Here's what's going on. Maybe every other one, every third one's got a call to action attached. Click the button. You type in your name. You type in your zip code. It tells you the name of your politician in your state, in Washington, D.C., your senator, your House of Representative member. If they're already signed on to the legislation, it will say thank you. Keep doing what you're doing. Get your friends to do it. If they haven't signed on, it will say, hey, Congressman X, please support this. Your constituency, Beta, Illinois, Beta, Wisconsin, whoever, Motorcycle Riders Foundation supports it. We need you to support it. And what we do with that information, we walk into an office and we know that a Congress creator, let's say, has gotten 400 or 500 electronic communications from our members. And we hear, well, I didn't know anything about that. Or I haven't heard from anybody. Oh, do tell. Your staffer's letting you down because we have 400 or 500 instances where somebody, directly contacted you and brought this up as an issue, and we need your support. So that's powerful, right? And then,
Right.
social media, we're making videos, and we're interviewing leaders from the movement, from the rights movement, from the aftermarkets, motorcycle parts industry, from, we'll have lawyers on there. So you can watch real time, it's on a TikTok or YouTube, and maybe it's better, but it's that kind of content, right? Where you can watch a short video. We'll link our stuff to this and to this podcast. We'll connect our stuff to One Gang and introduce our membership to, hey,
That's
pay
awesome.
attention to One Gang. Hardtail's going to be on One Gang, but guess what? They're covering topics relevant to all motorcyclists constantly. So, subscribe, listen, pay attention. Shop Talk by Chris Callan, who runs Cycle Source Magazine, has a show every Sunday. We're on it. But if we're not on it, I don't care. There's always something legislative. There's always some information in there that affects our lifestyle or our motorcycles. Keith Ball,
Yep.
former editor at Easy Riders, runs bikernet.com. Same thing, right? He collects crazy stories from all over the country about, electric vehicles not working, motorcycles getting confiscated, dudes getting profiled. So we will link folks to those as well. So, then, normally we tend to believe that if you get a couple of releases, you sign up for our alerts, you get a couple of alerts, you start to be interested in what we're talking about, what we've been talking about today. You get interested in that, and you do a couple call to actions, and you'll probably get a response from that senator or Congress, House of Representative member, and suddenly you realize, holy man, I can affect laws. I can make laws. I can stop laws. And I have a famous quote: once you walk the halls of Congress, or you realize that you really can redress your grievances with the Congress and have an impact. Who would have thought
Right.
a couple thousand motorcyclists could get 535 members of Congress to unanimously say profiling of a motorcyclist is a problem and we need to address it.
That's
That's
amazing.
incredibly powerful. It's life changing for me. It always has been. So, man, come to DC. We have a national lobby day. Bikers Decided the Beltway in May. We visit all 535 offices in one day. We have motorcyclists come in from 30, 40 states, from clubs, from organizations, from riding groups, and we
Nice.
hit the hill. And man, they come and do that, and you're hooked. You can't not back. You can never back away once you realize that you can walk into a member of Congress's office, have a conversation with them, and we're not paid lobbyists, right? We believe you can probably, if you're awake, can sense my passion, right? My love of this, my passion of this. Politicians
Absolutely.
do as well, right? They know if you're paid, if you're in a suit and tie. We have suit and tie lobbyists too. They know the rules. They have the connections. They
Right.
can get us in the offices. But nothing beats one of us who has something to lose or something to gain or something to protect or preserve coming in and saying, I need this, right? This isn't a hobby for me.
Yep.
This isn't something I can give up and do something else. This is me. Motorcycling, my lifestyle around motorcycling,
Right.
my
This is my
family's
lifestyle and
lifestyle.
passion. Yep.
It's us. You cannot take that away. And they'll feel that.
That's
They'll
right.
sense that. They'll
Kirk.
feel that. And it captures, right? So you hear me talking. I never leave a seminar without firing up a half a dozen or a dozen people. Hopefully they'll go fire up their dozen and they'll fire up their dozen. And that's
That's
how we
right.
grew, right? From a couple hundred ragtag members in Beta, Wisconsin to thousands to be one of the, I would suggest,
Thousands.
one of the most effective, if not the most effective lobbying group in the state of Wisconsin is Beta, Wisconsin. And
Hey,
that's how that happened. One
we
at a
wanted to
time.
ask you a question. This is kind of like a little bit off the cuff. It's a little weird question, but what's DC's real perception of the biker community? I mean, in all reality, I mean, did they really give a shit about us, or you have to constantly battle like this in order to make this thing aware?
Interesting question. There was a time in Hollywood didn't do us any favors. A lot of silly movies, a lot of silly
Right, for
perceptions,
sure.
a lot of dumb TV shows. And at one point in time, we were referred to as the great unwashed. And that's a quote unquote, we were called that. But I think, as they get to know us, which is again, the importance and the value of getting in front of your politicians when they're campaigning in your home states, get to know them when they're state guys, because they might be Fed guys, get to know the ladies, get to know their staffs. And once they get to know us and realize that, we're not in this for money. We're not in this for fame. We're in this because it's who we are. And when we do that, there are folks that, that watch too many TV shows, read too many TV stories because they love to sensationalize the stupid. The movement is really focusing on not having that happen. The leaders in the motorcycling community are really working hard on making sure, we don't take our mini bikes downtown New York City, popping wheelies on them, all hours of the day, taking our four-wheelers. There's a lot of groups working on, public perception, getting along where we can, when we should, type of thing. But as we get into those offices and they get to know who we are and realize that we're very in tune and very passionate about motorcycle safety and funding motorcycle safety, getting impaired drivers off the road, getting people licensed and trained properly, retrained properly. I'll fight just as hard as a Department of Transportation person when it comes to unlicensed riders or impaired riders. I've spent a lot of my life working on sober riding campaigns, ride your own ride campaigns, fund training, give training grants federally, give them in the state, preserve them when you get the money in the state, voluntarily take a couple bucks for every license plate, toss them into a training program so it's affordable for new riders, et cetera, et cetera. So again,
Right.
to answer your question, it's not as bad as it was. And I'd like to think that, and it helped when, all the executives started to ride Harleys and it became something that everybody had to have, and that fad is over.
Right.
But some of those guys hung on. So, and there's a lot of riders in Washington, D.C. We have a lot of members in the Federal Motorcycle Caucus, so federal politicians that ride bikes. So I think they're more receiving of who we are as a community. And then where they're not, or where they're not enough, sit down with 8 or 10 folks, they're just educate, share information, share stories. And most of what we want is very reasonable. We can explain why we want it. and we can, we can offer, here's what we do. We can make it safer. If you work with us, you can dream up your own plan to keep motorcycle safety safe, or you can partner with us who've already done it and know how to do it. Just fund us appropriately and give us the room and the space to be successful. We will be successful. Um, I think, you know, we have better success with politicians than they do with federal agencies, right? So NTSB, Federal Department of Transportation, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, their jobs are to have zero fatalities, zero people speeding, zero crashes. Um, that's not us. That's not possible, but we can have certainly a very impactful role in that. But let's partner and let's spend the monies appropriately, etc.
Thank you.
So we're going to ask you how people can find information on who their state representatives are involved. You've already addressed that. I think it's safe to say that most riders I think all riders want to preserve their freedom of choice. And in doing that, it seems like a no-brainer to sign up for alert. You get that information looking for how to get involved, how to stay abreast of important topics that are directly impacting the motorcycle community. Outside of alerts and memberships, what other options are there? You had mentioned social media. What would you say are the top channels to stay in touch with you guys?
It's a great question. So, I would first and foremost ask folks to subscribe to alerts at the Motorcycle Riders Foundation and go to your local state. You live in Wisconsin, A Beta Wisconsin has the same thing, right? For the state, you can sign up for
Okay.
to get their alerts, their press releases, their call to actions. You can most state motorcycle organizations have a way to connect to your state politicians like we do federally. But I would say the first two things: get involved at least electronically in the state you live in. Find that ABATE, find that state motorcyclist rights organization, find the Freedom of Road Riders. If you're in a club, find the Confederation Coalition Alliance, and just get electronic communication. And then you can make your choice from there. And then I would suggest you find, you know, podcasts and pay attention, right? We're driving, we're sitting at home eating Cheetos, you know, listen to One Gang, listen to BikerNet, listen to Shop Talk. And those guys are focused. Those are a lot of lifestyle shows, and those are fun and entertaining. And, we of course at the Motorcycle Riders Foundation know most of them. But we tend to steer towards ones that are interested in lifestyle issues, safety issues,
Sure.
legislative issues. So, we get to the MRAP, get our alerts, decide later. I mean, join us, great, but at least be educated, educate yourself. It's simple to do. Toss out a couple of contacts to your congressman. It takes about 30 seconds. Not kidding. Read it. Go to the mrf.org, click right when you get a release. It'll be a red button on the bottom. Click it. It says contact your legislator. And again, it tells you which one. It writes the letter for you. All you got to do is type your name and hit submit. Takes 30 seconds of your life. And then we use that. We make progress with those. That'd be the first. Do the same thing in the state organization. Again, search ABATE, Modified Motorcycle Association, search State Motorcycles Rights Organization, and you will find in every state in the nation some entity. Most are ABATEs, but again, State Motorcycles Rights Organizations. Florida has a great one, by the way. Man, ABATE of Florida is powerful. One of our strongest in the
Very.
country. So search those guys. You can sign up for their alerts, their electronic press release stuff, just as simple, and take a flyer, go to a meeting. There's meetings in about every county in the United States, every month, talking about motorcycle safety, motorcycle rights, um, you know, being responsible as a community, promoting safety, education, awareness rallies, awareness rides, poker runs that have a purpose that, to fund ourselves, to fund our legislative activities. So, take a flyer. I've not been chased out of a meeting in any of the 50 states. In fact, I've done it in many countries. I've never been chased out. When they realize who you are and you're there, obviously walk in, introduce yourself and say, you're interested in learning more about this, what's going on here. And you'll be
That's
overwhelmed,
right.
right? So take that flyer, take a little bit of time. If it's not for you, you don't like it. You might not get out without someone saying, hey, would you like a job? Would you sweep the corners on the Boca run? Or would you, go get 3 members? Or they won't let you leave till you sign up. I'm kidding, of course, but that's our job, right? We know we can't do this well numbers, and membership's important, but I can do, if I had 1 million members, I wouldn't need the membership, right? We could,
That's right.
we could turn this country on its ear. If we had 100 people or 1 million people answering calls to action and contacting your Congress critters, um, we wouldn't need to spend all the money we spend on professional lobbyists and traveling to DC every couple of weeks. And then, consider coming to Bikers Side the Beltway. It's a 2-day event, Washington, DC. We give you the talking points. If you've never been to DC, we'll go with you. Go to your state capital. Most motorcyclist rights organizations have a statewide lobby day, where 2, 3, 4, 500 bikers show up and talk to their state Congress folks, or state legislative members about motorcycle issues. Do things as simple as walk a parade, you know, do bike security in a campaign event, anything, put a yard sign up, anything that you can do
Right.
that would indicate you're a motorcyclist and you're active and you vote, is helpful. So going back to your first question, sign up for the Motorcycle Riders Foundation alerts, sign up for your state that you live in, that state motorcyclist rights organization's alerts, start paying attention to legislative oriented or safety oriented or lifestyle oriented shows like this one, and follow our social media. We'll connect you, right? We'll connect you to BikerNet. We'll connect you to One Gang. We'll connect you to Shop Talk with Chris Callen. We'll do those things for you. If you're paying attention, we'll
Awesome.
get you connected very, very quickly.
Before we go into the speed round, which is the fun part of the show, this is the educational part. So I've got this is going to be a 2-part question. One is going to be, what's down the pike now, man? What's coming up? You had mentioned something regarding parts for the industry. One and two. Second part of the question is going to be like, what's your feeling going into the future? We're getting older. There's a younger generation coming up. What's your feeling with what's on the horizon? Because eventually, us older guys, we get replaced by the younger guys. Do you see that type of a fight and passion from motorcyclists that are younger, or is it really just the old battle horses that are still fighting for this thing, man?
Yeah. So what has recently come down is probably the largest distributor of aftermarket parts. And for me specifically, Harley has come out with a communication that said you can't sell parts unless they've been certified or EPA or CARB certified, although we don't know what that is, right? You submit a part,
Right.
you spend a bunch of money, and you wait a long time to see whether or not they approve it. The problem is, one part at a time, that's almost impossible. What I'd like to do is give me a drivetrain, give me a fuel management system, give me an electronic fuel system, give me a carburetor or, electronic fuel injection, give me the throttle bodies, give me the gearing, give me the transmission, give me the engine, give me the rear wheel, chain drive, belt drive, give me that in a combination. Let me put it on a dyno and prove that I can beat your standards. I might not be able to do it with a pro tuner, because that could be potentially used to tamper. But if I use that tuner in the right combination with the right parts, with the right package, again, I said earlier, I can make a motorcycle run better, run more fuel efficiently, and put out less noxious fumes, a factory motorcycle. The other thing I can do, factory motorcycles, they build a couple 100,000 engines. They have tolerance. They have gaps. They have variances. They have tolerances. If I do a one-off motor, I can take all that out. So just that alone, I can make a motorcycle run better. So that's what we're asking, right? Don't come at us one part at a time. So this particular massive parts distributors come out and said, you can't put those parts on bikes anymore unless they've never been registered. wink, wink, take your plate off and say it's never been registered. Well, I'm not doing that. God knows that, someone's going to knock on my door and say, let me see your bike. I want it. I want it because it's
Right.
illegal. Or what liability is the dealership taking on? I mean, Harley's got it figured out, right? They have certified parts, and that's great for Harley. And I love Harley Davidson. But what happens to the 5,000 independent shops around the United States? Small business, economic impact of all those people that make a living. And they can't make a living changing tires and painting gas tanks. They have to do engine work. They have to do transmission work. They have to do performance upgrades. They have to do carburetor work, right? They can't just do it on tires and handlebars. So this particular distributor came out and said, you have to sign a piece of paper. So let's say Hardtail's vintage classic motorcycle shop. I'm going to put a part on a motorcycle. I have to sign a document that says I'm putting it on a motorcycle that's for race use only, off-road race use only. So now the liability is on me. So do I choose to put that onto the customer? Yes or no? I may or may not. If a customer's, awake, they would say no. And me as a professional, if a bike comes in with stock tires, stock suspension, mostly stock engine, and the guy wants a stage 3 something or other on his bike,
Right.
I'm not an idiot. Obviously, he's not doing that to hill climb or to drag race. If it's a bone stock motorcycle, and there's 27 baggers that race in the bagger races. So what happens? The other 7,000, 10,000, 50,000 that want a minor, stage 1 or stage 2 type upgrade on their bike. So transferring that liability, and I understand why, right? The EPA and CARB has come out and levied millions, hundreds of thousands of dollars, up to millions of dollars of fines on some of these aftermarket parts manufacturers, parts distributors. So I understand why they're doing it. I'm not holding them in contempt for doing it. They're trying to survive as well. But if we all fold, right? If we all fold to the EPA and we all fold to CARB without saying, give us the rules, let us prove we can build motorcycles as good or better than your standard. Right. Give us all the parts to do that and let us stay in business, right? Again, a third of an inch on a 100-yard football field, and you're going to put 3,000-4,000 people out of business, or 3,000 or 4,000 shops. Could be tens of thousands of people, millions.
The other side of that too, Kirk.
What?
You've got, look at it. If you look at it as a world issue, America stands in the bottom quarter of the pollution index. So really there are 3 other full-size football fields past the first one.
Good point.
It's
a stadium at that point. Yeah. So that, that's really concerning, right? So, we're going to approach it multiple ways, right? We're going to dust off our economic impact analysis to try to, slow this down a little bit, to give time for distributors, parts manufacturers, parts certifiers, distributors, small shops, independent users, to figure this out. And, I think we'll be impactful, right? Right now, with the way the economy is going,
Right.
I don't think anyone wants to stand up and say, put a whole bunch of little guys out of business in favor of the big guy. Secondly, give us the rules, right? Don't tell us to submit a part at 30 grand and I'll tell you sometime down the future if it's good or not. Let me submit a motorcycle. Let me submit a package. Let me submit a bunch of components on an operating motorcycle to prove I can do better, right? And then this whole right to repair, right to modify, right? They gave us the ability to build a 1 per lifetime custom when we defeated the EPA Color Chrome stuff. If you build less than 10,000 motorcycles, you can meet tier 1 emissions, which is pretty easy. If you build 10,000 or more, you have to meet tier 2 emissions. What happens when we decide we're going to come up with a tier 3 emission, which pretty much has to be water cooled, oil cooled, radiated, no air cooled engines? So then what? Why would we do that? Why, other than this crazy green push or, green climate stuff?
Yeah, it's the crazy green push. That's all it is.
So, that's what's real time. And that's literally this week. So we had a conference call last night.
Hey, can I say something?
Yep.
I think a lot of it has to do too, is that, this whole push, right? This transition after the switch in government in 2020, and then, with COVID and all the bullshit, after that. I think also in addition to is it's been squeezing small businesses when, what was happening was like, let's say like Harley Davidson. And I'm just mentioning names because I'm a small shop. So I'm gonna fight for small shops. Right. So you had companies like Harley Davidson, JP Cycles, all the big boys, right? The big retailers, they would buy up all the parts, right? So they'd have all the tires, they'd have all the carburetors, that have all the throttle bodies. They'll have everything that you need to run a fast moving we were used to. And now all of a sudden they buy these large sums, and then you've got maybe a certain amount of tires, certain amount of parts laying for, you know, 10,000 shops around the United States to fight for, right? So everybody needs tires, man, because they got to keep the business. So I've seen this pinch going, man, and this is really just to feed the 1% businesses, right? The muscles, the muscle of the industry, and squeeze the little guys out, man. This has been a transition, since 2019? I mean, I think it's right after COVID and all the parts shortages that we were having, and what they did was just continue. It's the same thing like when the lumber shortage. Home Depot had lumber, but Joe's lumberyard didn't have lumber. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
Yep.
and it's, I don't know, man. I'm talking from my point. I might be talking on my ass, but I mean, that's how I felt, and I've seen this writing on the wall where now Harley won't. They can cancel your warranty if a small shop puts on an exhaust for you, or if they do this for you, they can cancel a warranty. That's not fair, man, because then they're just really monopolizing it and trying to take all the business.
100% right. So when we started working with the independent aftermarket industry, we started something called the MRM Industry Council in the mid 90s. There were 12,000 shops. And then pre-COVID, there were 8,000 shops. And now there's arguably 4,000 or 5,000 shops. So that exactly what you stated. How do we keep the little guy in business? In my town, I had 6 shops within 100 miles. Now I got one, and he's 72 years old. So if you can't fix your own bike, you're facing trouble. And then, now we created the Independent Motorcycle Shop Association, led by former industry executives, aftermarket industry executives, and we're their lobbying arm. So we're processing their memberships. And so if a shop wants to sign up as an Independent Motorcycle Shop Association member, that membership comes to us, and then we have a very specific agenda just for what we call IMA in Washington, D.C. So not only do we represent our state motorcycle rights organizations, we represent the clubs in the sustaining club part of our organization. Now we have the Independent Motorcycle Shop Association, where we specifically tailor an agenda and tailor some activity to those independent shops, big and small. And then your question about, are the is the younger generation picking this up? I would have said 8-10 years ago, our number one issue was we're aging out. We're getting burned out. We're aging out. We've worn out. We don't have the fire, the energy we used to have. And that was concerning. You couldn't go to a state seminar, motorcycle convention without talking about, burnout, age out, wear out. And a lot of our movements, we're talking about it. Okay. So let's move into YouTube. Let's move into social media. Let's put flashy, short press releases together. Let's make sure our parties aren't 18 hours of blues, right? Let's bring in a rapper, let's bring in, the drinks that, my kids drink, and bring in the fizzy waters and the lemonade, the beer lemonades or whatever they are. I don't know what they are. But bring that in, right? So we started to bring that in. Let's have bike games at daylight. Not the drag races in the sand and, jumping in the bale of hay looking for a potato. Let's do a skills contest, right? How long can you stand a 2x4? How tight a circle can you go into? Things that, younger people pride themselves in being good riders, and they don't all have Harley Davidsons. So let's make sure that we're welcoming to all brands, and we are. Doesn't appear like it sometimes, and you pull up to a meeting and 70 of the bikes are Harleys and 2 are BMWs or a Goldwing or 2. So we are very purposeful in our making sure we're open. All brands welcome. We'll wear T-shirts to say that. If we see a brand show up that we don't see often, like a Moto Guzzi or a Triumph, you'll see offers from our organization run out there and pull them in. But make sure we have skills
Right.
contests and, music that they appreciate. Make sure we have, food and drinks they appreciate. So we brought in wine tasting, our big, huge A-Beta Wisconsin summer Hummer. We had cheese and wine tasting. We had axe throwing. We had seltzer waters. We had skills contests. We brought a rapper in. And lo and behold, you look around and the crowd's younger and they're staying up a lot later than we
Nice.
are. And they're having more fun. So, we're starting to, we're smarter, right? As an organization and a movement, if we want to survive, we know we have to do those things. We have to connect where they need. So, when we put out a call to action, if it doesn't get a lot of activity, we try to figure out why. It's not just about,
Right.
a lot of younger riders have no issues wearing helmets. They were brought up in a safe environment, right? Don't go down the slide. Don't go on the merry-go-round. Wear a helmet on your bicycle. God, don't ride a skateboard, right? So they're okay with helmets and full road gear. And that's fine at GAT. That's okay with me. All the gear, all the time. That's fine. So how do we connect, right? It's easy. You get a 60-year-old guy that didn't have to wear a helmet, tell him to put a helmet on, he's going to fight. You take a 30-year-old kid who's worn a helmet for 10 years and say, we're going to fight a helmet law, they're gone. So what else are they interested in? Sober riding, group riding,
Right.
skills riding, classes for their friends to take, et cetera, et cetera. Doing classes on how to change oils, how to do the T-clock, how to inspect your motorcycle, right? New riders. How do you safely check a motorcycle? Check the tires, you check the cables, you check the gears, check it over. How do you do that? Just sending someone a piece of paper, say, do T-clock on your bike. What does that mean? They don't know.
Right.
So again, those kind of things. And I think in general, I'll make a general comment. We're really struggling with the younger generation not wanting to join. And I think that's not a surprise. The demographic is they move quickly. They don't get deep. They don't join a lot of things. And, I don't care if you're Whitetails Unlimited, Ducks Unlimited, National Rifle Association, it doesn't matter. They're struggling with some of those same demographics we are in the motorcycle community. However, I think, when you're starting to mandate the end of internal combustion engines or you're mandating the end of a gas stove, I think the younger generation is starting to say, wait a minute, that's all crazy talk. That's too much, right? I can take a piece at a time. And what our job becomes is, the boiling of the frog story, right? If you throw a frog in a boiling pot of water, it's going to jump out. If you throw them in a cold pot of water and you turn it up a degree a minute, the frog will boil itself to death and not even jump. So that's what we've got to do is we've got to not be crazy. We can't put a tinfoil hat on and
Right.
try to scare everybody. But through shows like this, like what discussions we've just had, these are real issues that we're facing, and the life directives and internal combustion engine bans and elimination of aftermarket parts, except by the big boys. That's all real, right? So without acting crazy and talking crazy, just compel the folks to say, it's coming, and here's a big dose of it's coming. We're going to count on, we're going to need to get the same level of activity of the next generation as we did. It's funny. I tell
Right.
folks, when I was 25 years old, I wanted to have a cool bike. I wanted to go cruising. I wanted, the opposite sex to think what I was doing was cool. And young kids are no different, right? They're very gregarious, a generation. They want to be around. They want to be liked.
For sure.
They want to be popular. They want to be in groups. They want to do stuff. So we got to give them a little bit of time, right, to do that. And, the folks, and it happened in every generation, right? The hippies became bank executives, and, those of us that wanted to race and raise cane now are doing what I'm doing, right? The next generation, we need to be patient, give them time to grow into what we do. Hopefully enough of them see it as important. It's our job to make it welcoming,
Right.
make it relevant to them, give them a reason to be involved, and then love them to death when they get involved versus, hey, we're not doing that. Screw you if you wear a helmet, or we're not having rap at our party. Well, you can't do that, right? We have to start to adapt to the next generation, right? It was interesting. Sherm Packard, who's the Speaker of the House, he's a long time, he's in every motorcyclist Hall of Fame in the country. including multiple awards from Motorcycle Riders Foundation. He's the Speaker of the House in New Hampshire, second most powerful person in New Hampshire. He's a motorcyclist. He was a motorcyclist and a biker first, became a politician, and now he's a critically important politician. He said, if we don't fight for our rights today, we won't have them tomorrow, right? And he's
Right.
in the seat where he can see that. So, how do we make sure that we're all sharing that message? We're not being grumpy old graybeards. You can't. I've walked into several meetings, right? And everybody's grousing about the leadership, grousing about the country, grousing about the young kids, grousing about the fact nobody cares. Well, guess what? Do you think they're going to stay in that environment? Of course they're not. They're going to get out of there like someone
Right.
set their foot on fire. So when you see somebody come in on a different brand or a different age or a different lifestyle, different from what we think is the right way, club guy, not club guy, motorcyclist rights activist, doesn't matter. Safety guy, not safety guy, road rider, not road rider, doesn't matter. When they come in, we have to make sure that we connect the dots and get them engaged in something that will trigger them wanting to do what we do. And I think we can. I really do. I believe if we do our jobs, this generation, my generation, me, and all of the leadership in the movement and our membership all get behind the idea that if we really do want to survive, I didn't put 50 years into this to see it fail. So
Right, for
it's
sure.
incumbent upon me to be successful. It's incumbent upon me to convince all of our membership, all of our constituents that we represent at the MRF or Urbana, Wisconsin, or whoever, to be successful. And I'm seeing that change, right? I'm starting to state by state, event by event, convention by convention, starting to see younger kids in the room. I shouldn't call them kids, starting to see younger adults in the room. And believe me, they're just as passionate. They might not be as passionate as I am about helmets, but they're just as passionate about something related to two wheels. So we have to embrace that and use that. And I really do think we can. I really do. I'm optimistic, but
Awesome.
I tend to be
Awesome.
a glass mostly
Thank you
full
for-
guy, but I'm pretty optimistic. I think we
Good.
can have some success if we all agree we should, and then go do it.
Yep. And just educate. Educate.
That's it.
All right. You ready for some fun?
Yeah,
We got the
let's go.
seriousness out of the way. Now we got 15 questions, 2 minutes on the clock, and Ben's gonna read them off. So you tell us
Okay.
when you're ready. No wrong answer, man.
Let's go.
All right, first question. Best motorcycle ever built in your opinion?
Knucklehead, Harley Davidson Knucklehead.
Best place you ever rode and why?
Black Hills in South Dakota. The roads, the scenery, phenomenal.
Fuel injected, carburetor, or electric?
Old school, baby.
More options.
Favorite cruising speed? 40 to 50, 75 to 100, or 100 plus?
75 to 100. Got to keep it under 100.
Favorite type of riding road? Curvy, straightaway, trails, dirt, scenic, combination?
Yeah, two. I have two questions. I love the blast down the interstate. I like the hammer to Sturgis. Just hammer, listen to the bikes resonate is great. And then I like, Black Hills type mountainous scenery, a little bit of adrenaline, a little bit of testosterone, kind of all going at the same time. So that's a twofold answer.
Nice. All right. One law you could change or you would change if you were president to help the motorcycle community?
Preserve. I would be very active in preserving internal combustion engines and really the heritage and history of America, right? Let me invent, let me be creative, let me handle the technology, open it up to me, let me be successful.
Favorite motorcycle movie of all time?
World's Fastest Indian is one of my absolute favorites.
Favorite book you'd recommend everyone should read?
I read a ton. I will say the one I just read that's was entertaining to me was Willie G's biography about his years at Harley Davidson. Very entertaining book. Anything
I
that
got
has
that
to
for
do with
Christmas.
sort of that's a great book. And then I collect any club member that's written a book, any 1%er club member that's put a book out, I own them all. And I've learned about leadership, something about organization, something about motivation in every one of those books.
Go-to alcoholic beverage.
I do not drink. I've been 2003, clean and sober since 2003.
Good for you.
Nice.
God bless you.
Before then, it was
PBR.
PBR Kessler whiskey, but not since 2003.
Last meal ever. What would it be?
Big chunk of black Angus steak, or if I could get it, a big steak, an eland steak, or a big chunk of black Angus, probably from my family's ranch.
What's your family's ranch?
Out in North Dakota. There's different members of my family milling around black Angus cattle.
That's awesome.
All right. If you could meet someone, past or present, who would it be?
Jesus Christ.
If you're stranded on a desert island, what is the one band or album?
It would have to be an Allman Brothers or Leonard Skinner album.
If you could swap lives with a cartoon character for a day, who would it be and why?
Probably Yosemite Sam. He was just he had control of him. He was a wild dude.
Yeah, he was.
Sure. All right. What's an unusual talent you possess that nobody or few people know about?
Well, I ran a 4-minute mile once.
A 4-minute mile?
4-minute mile.
Damn.
Nobody would believe that today.
What are you, Forrest Gump? Crazy. That's
Yeah,
fast.
Just a couple weeks ago, right?
That was
Wow.
about 1980s. Yeah, right.
If you could make a rule for a day and have everyone follow it, what would it be?
Everybody needs to learn how to ride a motorcycle. Just once. I think
Awesome.
we have
Well
50
said.
million motorcyclists.
Agreed. I think it's that initial fear that they're afraid of. But I mean, there are some people who don't belong behind or even a driving wheel, never mind a motorcycle. But for the most
Yeah,
part, most
yeah.
people are pretty competent.
You're right.
Kirk, thanks, man.
Thank Kirk.
Thank
Thank
you
you so
so
much.
much. It's been an
Appreciate you,
honor.
man.
Yeah, it's been an honor to get to chance to get to know you, man, and seeing the fight that you're fighting with people all across this country, man. So keep up the fight, and we're gonna follow your journey, and hope you don't mind. We'll check in and maybe get you on in towards the end of the year and see what 2024 has transpired, and kind of continue pushing sign-ups and getting people into that organization.
I appreciate that. I really appreciate what you guys are doing. It's important.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Stay
Pleasure.
stay
Thanks for joining us,
yeah.
Kirk.
Stay healthy, stay
We'll
safe,
put all your links in the bottom.
and ride safely, brother.
Very good. Thank you. You guys as well.